Alright, so we're gonna learn how to bind a table to an array of objects. So we start out with one table, and this table has one row, and one is for the invoice ID, and one is for the invoice amount. So somehow we want to bind these two text boxes to these fields and this object. Well, this is the template. So we instantiate one of these objects, and so we want to bind this object to this row. So how do we do that? Well, we first we need Angular. So AngularJS is just one file, Angular, and then we tell this div to be an ng app, and I name it my app, and we need a controller, and ng controller equals my controller. So now in the script, we're gonna put the this object inside our controller. First, we need my app. So Angular module my app, and the second parameter is brackets, and then right here we can add a controller. And same thing, my controller, and the second parameter is function and scope as the parameter. All right, so we're gonna move this guy inside here, and we drop the bar, and instead we qualify the invoice variable with scope. So so we got a row, and we have the invoice rate, the object invoice. So in order to bind this object to this row or these text boxes, we don't even need IDs. So let's drop the IDs. But we need an ng model. Ng model equals this object invoice and one of its properties. So invoice ID. And same thing with this one, ng model equals invoice amount. Okay, so when I run this page, I should see these values, the invoice number and the amount, inside these boxes because now they're bound. And if I change the boxes now, this object should change. And how do we know if they're modifying each other? It's a two-way binding. So how do we know? Well, we can make sure you stay within the div because this div is my application. So I'm gonna put here a p, and then I'm gonna ng bind ng bind. Ng bind is just read from the object equals invoice ID. Okay, so that binds this p tag, and we get another p tag. And this time we're not going to use ng bind. We're going to use the equivalent, which is the double curly braces, and it's going to be invoice amount. And we're going to add a filter currency. This is to display the amount. And let's see if that works. So as you can see, it is working. And if we change this invoice number, anyone bound to this field will change. Same thing with this one, 150. So everything changes. We change the text box, we change the object, and we change the p tag. So so we change this one. The object changes, and the p tags change. And then you say, well, that's pretty cool, but what I really want is I want to have, if I add, if instead of having just one invoice, I have an array of invoices here, and if I add an invoice to the array, I want Angular to build clones of this row, with their inputs and their bindings, uh, yeah, automatically bound to the new invoice object. And that's pretty easy to do. I'll just tell the row to go ng repeat. Just repeat this code or this markup um, for each invoice in invoices. So this invoice variable is going to be this one. So if I change this one to inv, I would have to change this one to inv. So this is the variable representing each of the objects added to the invoices array. We don't have the array yet. So we can change this one into the array invoices. Now it's going to be an array. Okay, so what happens now? Now we have an empty array. Uh, uh, and this earlier, these ones were bound to an object right here, but we ain't got no object no more. Uh, so this is saying, hey, what do I do? I have no object. Well, Angular tells it, well, don't show anything. So this row is not even going to show. And so this one is no longer valid. Instead, I can put a list here, to read the objects from the array, and li and ng repeat. Use the same trick, equals uh, invoice and invoices, and for the li markup, I'm going to use well, I can use the same p tag, so p ng bind equals invoice ID, and yeah, we can have the same as earlier. So P and the amount invoice amount with the currency filter. All right. Let's make this one into an order list so we can see how many invoices we have added. So order list. Now it's going to repeat a number. I mean, it's gonna number our items consecutively. All right. Looks like we're ready to go. Uh, but array is empty, so it needs to have elements. Oh yeah, I know. So how can we add elements? Well, if you know a little bit of JavaScript, you know that push pushes an item to the end of the array. So I'm going to put a button there, and it's really nice that Angular has event handlers like ng-click. That means every time I click on this button, uh, it's going to call a method in our controller, and the method name is going to be add invoice. I'm not going to pass anything because I'm just going to add a new invoice with blank uh, invoice ID and 0 for the amount. So like I said, the ng-click calls a method. So how do we add a method? And it's just like another regular property in the array add invoice. But now this property does not contain a value, it contains a function. And this function just pushes a new invoice to the array. So scope invoices push new invoice, and then we initialize it with blank and a 0. All right, so that should work. And we also want to demonstrate how to remove items from the array. Well, we do another button. So each of these created rows, of course, needs to have its own button to remove that particular row. So put another button here, and ng click equals, of course, remove invoice. Yeah, but how does the controller know which row was clicked? Well, we got a nice cool thing called index that we can pass, and it knows the position of the row that was clicked. And so now we add that method as well. And this property is a function, and we pass an index. You know, we can name this differently than this. So pass an index and removing, if you know a little bit of JavaScript, you can say that if we have an array scope invoices, and then we splice it, and we pass the index or the position where we want to splice it at, and how many elements to remove, just one row, and that should do it. So now let's test it out. Alright, so we're back. Cross your fingers. We're going to add a new item. Boom. Looks like it's working. So the invoice number is 7M433. That's item number one is your invoice number, and this is the amount. Like originally it starts at 0, but we can put $50 in it, and boom. So that's our row number one. Add another one, so it adds row number two, and simply we can put our invoice number as 8K993. All right, so that's our next invoice number. Make this one $100, and add 3P 873, $30. Boom, it's added. So change the first one to 100. It knows what we're changing. And now if we remove the first one, it removes it from the array. The row gets removed from the table, and the list gets updated. So it's pretty cool. So that's it. Thanks for watching.